Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and it was so much fun to watch this week's Survivor episode with about 950 of my closest friends in Chicago.
I know, I'm so jealous.
Yes, yes. And now it's time for me to introduce my co host. Or should I?
Wha
Hold on. I have to decide.
Oh,
I, I'm, I'm,
oh,
I'm not sure if I want to.
hmm,
Let me think about it.
but I'm
Well,
really I'm
well,
really interested in being part of this. Is that I mean, you and
I,
I have
I mean,
we have history,
we,
right?
we could do rock, paper, scissors.
Well, who am I gonna do rock, paper, scissors with?
Oh, well, okay, then I guess I will. And of
Oh,
course,
okay.
that would be Jessica Lewis.
And listen, we all know how I feel about rocks, so
Yes.
let's not play
You'll
rock,
never
paper,
do
scissors,
rock.
okay?
So don't
No.
bother to do paper because you will
Ugh,
never do rock.
unbelievable. Well, yes, so thank you for allowing me to join you, because that would have been really awkward. You would have been doing this all by yourself. Maybe you would have just shoved me off the screen or made me sit mute. I'm not sure. But now we don't have to find that out, do
That's
we?
right. That's right. Well, I'd like to start by thanking every single person who said hello to me, talked about the podcast with me, and
Mhm.
said they were a fan. It really does mean a lot, and I appreciate it. Maybe more than you all know, especially with this being the first event in the new era that my health has allowed me to attend. Uh,
I'm so glad you got to go.
yeah. Now, lots of people asked of you about you. You
Oh.
were definitely missed,
Oh,
and you were
thanks.
there in spirit because I wore the socks that a listener had sent us or sent me a while ago with your face on them. Now, there was no way for me to show these when I was briefly on stage during the commercial break because no one would have been able to see them. But anyone who came up to me,
Oh,
I tried to mention that, and I did take a picture
I
of it. So
love that you wore my face on your socks when you went there.
yes.
Thank you for that. That means so much to me. I would have loved to have attended, but as you are very well aware, I
Hmm.
had just traveled for a conference for my job and then for the wedding for Adam. And then it was like, I have a crazy trial starting in June. So it was just like so many things to try to cram into a
Yep.
very tight space, and unfortunately, it just didn't work. But I am so glad I was there in spirit, and I'm sorry that I missed everyone. I'm sure it was a phenomenal time. I've
It
seen
was.
lots
Yes.
of pictures and videos, and everyone seemed to just be having an incredible, incredible time together. So that's always nice to see everyone coming together like that.
Yeah, yeah. I do plan to post pictures on social media. I posted a couple so far, but more will be coming. I just had to concentrate on the podcast before doing any of
Mm,
that. Um,
mhm.
so yeah, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the Chicago trip. Well, okay, I do, but we have a podcast to get to, and I also do want to say all the players who were there were great with their time and talking to different people. Uh,
Mm.
one of the most adorable things I saw was at the Cubs game. There were a group of kids, a big group of kids sitting right next to us in a big section. And some of them recognized a few of the Survivor players, and they came over in a couple groups to take pictures of them. And
Oh.
yeah, the players were so open and willing to take pictures, and the kids were just ecstatic. So this is the next generation of Survivor fans here.
Yes, and it's so nice when you can feel that, like, kind of warm and fuzzy response. I know that as a Survivor player, I'm always willing if someone says,
Hmm.
"Hey, can I take your photo?" Absolutely 100%. Because when I see Survivor players, I'm like, "Can I take the picture with you?"
Yeah, same here.
I
Trust me.
say- like I am that person as
Yeah,
well. And so I have to remind myself sometimes, like, maybe not so much with the photos because it's like whatever event I go to, it's like I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, but at the same time, like, I'm a huge fan still, and
hmm,
so I definitely wanna be part of that as well. So I totally get it and fully support it.
yeah. All right, moving to Venus, there were a lot of Venus fans, while also
Mm,
being a lot of people who saw that Venus maybe hadn't been playing a great game of Survivor. And there was, of course, an intersection of both because some people were her fans for her personality, straightforwardness, mess, and fun, but also
mhm.
realized that without spoiling the rest of this podcast, her gameplay overall perhaps was not a winning uh, game plan. And yes, I was wrong that that she would be a zero vote finalist. But my biggest emphasis, as you'll recall, was in saying she would not win. Uh,
You
so,
got to find a way to be right there.
well, yeah, obviously, I mean, I wasn't with Erica and Gabler, so when I made that same very definitive statement,
Oh,
uh,
I know.
so I was trying to read the edit and also some outside the game activity for reasons, uh, that I was pretty certain of the finalist part. And as I discussed previously, I did not think Venus ever found out the truth in the game about the way certain things happen, because not finding out the truth would explain why she still seemed to have misconceptions about what happened, within the game, if she didn't
Mm,
spend time in Ponderosa with the other jurors finding out information. As it turned out, she did go to Ponderosa, but as she said in her interviews, it was not a happy time for her at all. And
yeah.
she and the other
Yeah.
jurors basically didn't talk to each other. So it ends up having essentially the same effect, that she still
Yeah.
did not get that filled in, or they didn't compare notes on what happened.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a component now that we don't get to see what happens at Ponderosa is a little bit
I don't know that they
diminishing
just
for
showed us that one.
well, we could have seen something, right? There
Mhm,
might have been something. And if anything, I can remember from my season, there were interviews conducted of people who were already at Ponderosa
mhm,
who were speaking about me.
right,
And you can gain a little bit more of an insight information, what their
mhm,
thoughts are about this person. I learned some things about myself that others thought about me when I because you walk in there and you're not
right,
sure. You've just
right,
been playing a game with people for $1,000,000 and you've
mhm,
done some stuff that's probably pissed a few of them off. And now you have to be like, hi, I get to stay with you and
yeah,
like, yay. And it can be uncomfortable. So I feel for her that there were a lot of what felt like uncomfortable moments based upon her descriptions
mhm,
and that she didn't find it to be a space that you can relax. That was the one thing I can say Ponderosa did bring some
right.
closure, but frustration at the same time. So that's just unfortunate that she
Yeah,
wasn't able to have that.
I remember your Ponderosa that they had, like, a scene of you and Sunday. Like, I don't know if it was natural that you 2 came together to talk it out,
Mm.
or it was encouraged, by
No.
production.
It was
So
I will say that was what I really appreciated so much about Ponderosa, is
mhm,
the only time anything was structured where they wanted to get a particular shot
mhm,
was when I was running on the beach because
mhm,
they were like, "We're gonna go over with a helicopter, and we want you to just be running on the beach because I had been
okay,
running, like, every day, and so I
mhm,
was like, "Okay." So I went running on the beach, but otherwise, it was very natural, and if they wanted to talk with you, all of a sudden they would just kinda, like, walk up and they're like,
mhm,
"Hey, what are you doing?" And then you just have, like, a conversation. It There was nothing forced. If you didn't wanna hang out with anyone, you didn't have to, and Sunday and I really did bond in
mhm,
Ponderosa. We were able to work through a lot of the issues that we had in the game, and it felt so nice to have those
mhm,
moments with her out there, and I really am happy that I was able to experience that because you don't want to end a game
right.
like that on a bad note, and so to not have that for Venus, I think is frustrating, for her, I'm sure, because you probably wanna be able to find some closure.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder if there had been cameras there, would things have been a little different, or would they still have been doesn't matter. But we'll never know.
That's a fair point, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious.
yeah. Now, at dinner, when I was at dinner just before going to watch the show, I was eating with, several people, as it turned out. Um,
Several?
yes, Corey B predicted that Venus would get voted out because this was the first time Venus had been at a watch party with her season 46 castmates, and
Mm,
her parents were there too.
mm,
And that got me thinking that going out at that point could indeed also explain the lack of Ponderosa information, like we just discussed. And because of that, because of what Corey B said, and because of that thought process, I went into the show believing that he was right. And he was. So shout out Corey B.
There you
Uh, I,
go.
I told him that in person too. Uh, Now, speaking of predictions, we have to acknowledge, and I literally
Oh,
have to because I
yes.
was told we have to,
Well,
that that uh, that our
there was
guest
a nice
last week,
reminder on that was
yes,
posted too.
yes,
Just yeah.
um, uh, that our guest last week, Dr. Jeremy Faust, his prediction last week was correct. Okay,
Yes.
he had an 86% chance of being right since his pick was literally anyone but Maria. So I am absolutely closing that loophole going forward. No more of that nonsense.
No more group decisions. You
No,
can't pick more than
no,
one. All
no.
right. Well, I will say, Dr. Jeremy Faust did a phenomenal job with us last week. I was very excited to have him join us. My
Mm,
mother was like, "He was great," and I always love it when I get my mother's opinions because she listens to us all every
mhm.
week and enjoys it very much and does have some colorful commentary at times about both players and guests. And so it's always nice to hear what my mother has to say
Mhm.
about all of that. And so she was a huge fan. So thank you so much to Jeremy for coming out and, well, I mean, I should just say coming on, right?
Yeah,
Being
yes,
with us. So that was
yeah.
great.
All right. Well, moving forward with Venus here, she told Gordon Holmes that few players can pinpoint the exact moment where their game went down the toilet, but she knew.
Mm.
As I've mentioned for the past 2 weeks now, even in situations where there was one key moment in time where a player should have done something different, we have to remember that there's almost always a much bigger series of events or actions that led to it. This is especially true this week because the situation Venus was in was different from the ones Hunter and Tiffany had been in. We'll look at everything else surrounding that decision by following our usual path of comparing how she played to my rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season one and have been updating ever since. Using all the non spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. And I emphasize non spoiler. There was nobody there who told me anything. I want to make that very clear. So,
Oh, that's that
um,
well, and I do think that a lot of people are very good about that.
yes,
No
yes,
one because you don't wanna be spoiled and you don't
right,
wanna spoil it for someone, so
right.
that's good.
I just want to make sure listeners and viewers understand that, just
Yeah,
because you'll see
sure.
pictures of me with certain people doesn't mean that I know anything,
Right.
anything special. I know lots, but not anything special. Um,
Oh, yes,
yeah,
here we go.
yes,
David is always right, so you
duh.
know lots.
Um, all right, the newest version of the rules can be found at robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Go and click on the link bubble for Survivor rules. But
Yes.
before we address how Venus did in terms of the rules, we always have some other things to discuss from the episode.
Mhm.
And the first is something I already alluded to in the opening, and that is Maria's decision. According to
Mhm.
Venus, it went on even longer than we saw. And as much as I like Maria, this was, in words that Q would say, a big mistake.
Yeah, this was bad. This
Yeah.
was very bad.
I mean, both in terms of who she chose for the reward and how she went about it. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, at least a couple other players even noted that she shouldn't have prefaced her decision by saying she was picking the people who needed it the most and then picking Q. Even Q
Right.
had a confessional laughing about it.
I know. He was like, what did he was
Yeah,
like? I'm the richest man on the
yeah,
island right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Basically, like
I think that was
he
a
had just
secret scene, but yeah,
yes, but
yeah.
it was very on point. Very
Yes.
on point.
I mean, Q was already in her pocket, so she didn't need to bring him. She should have wanted to keep Liz on her side, or at least make Liz think she was on her side. Um, plus after everything with Liz last time, it should have been a clear choice. But of course, nothing in Survivor is a totally clear choice.
Right.
You know,
No, and I will say if I can just jump in here for two
yeah.
seconds too, just about Liz, because I know that this has been a discussion, a debate. We might have already mentioned
Hmm.
some of this about the food, but I do think that nobody owes anyone anything when
Right.
they're out on the island, right? And so whatever decision you're going to make needs to be made for whatever reason makes the most sense
Yes.
for that player.
Right.
So you can't be making choices based upon I feel bad for this person because they made me feel bad
Hmm.
previously because they didn't get to eat. And we all know Liz is struggling with food because of the allergies, but again, that was Liz's choice to
Right.
partake in this game.
Right.
So I do think that there is something to be said about finding a reason for making your choices, but if
Hmm.
the reason is going to be those who need it most, well then that needs to be the decision that follows. You
Yeah.
can't then change it on the fly and then do rock, paper, scissor and remove
Yeah.
people from the equation who clearly need food more than Q.
Yeah.
So I do think overall, just a bad. I mean, those moments in Survivor are always uncomfortable. And then
Hmm.
when you add to the uncomfortableness by doing what she did,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. I understand she and Venus did not get along. Fine. Then
Hmm.
just pick Ben and Liz and be done with it.
Yeah,
You know,
over and done,
right.
finish.
By taking so long and then leaving it up to, like you said, rock, paper, scissors, to quote Rush, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Yes, that is completely correct. David, you're
So,
right, and so
yes,
is Rush.
so is Rush, the late, great Neil Peart. Um, Switching to a different original Sega person, Ben talked on the episode about how a group who will do one vote together probably won't be the same group who does a second vote together.
Mm,
And it's been a
mhm.
constant shift since the beginning of the merge. And while that's true, it also hides the Sega 3 who have been doing votes together.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
At least so far. So it's one thing to say, oh, everybody's voting differently. But are they? I mean, yeah, this
yeah.
time he didn't technically vote the same way as them, but he was in on it. He
But
that
I
was
was very confused with his vote choice.
I mean, it was just I think it was a backup vote. It was
Yeah,
a if an idol is played and a shot in the dark hits or something like that, or this way you don't have to worry about it since they had the numbers.
right, right. Yeah, no, I do think that the voting choices have been strange thus far. As far as of who is being focused on and the reasons why, and then the final decision that is being made. But I realize we're dwindling in numbers as far as
Yeah,
who's left. But
yeah,
yeah, the Sega 3 is definitely still the Sega 3.
yeah.
So
For the moment.
mhm.
And the third Sega is, of course, Charlie. For most of the last few seasons, we have discussed how players need to precisely time when to take out the big threats. And Charlie is going through that exact process. Uh, maybe he's heard us talk about it. Even
Maybe.
if, yeah, even if Maria had not won immunity and Venus hadn't said anything, I still don't think he would have targeted Maria for the reason that I gave during the commercial break when I was on stage. You keep the bigger shield, you get rid of their lieutenant, to reduce their power.
Mhm.
Now, in this case, he still has the lieutenant and the shield, and it is set up for very good timing for the tribal councils that are left. Plus, as Owen pointed out in his panel after the show, Charlie has the ability to win challenges.
Yeah, he does. Yes. Charlie's doing great, I will
Yeah.
say. I'm very pleasantly surprised by Charlie. I wasn't really sure how he was going to land at the beginning of the season because
Hmm.
he was young and in law school and maybe just a little too excited about
Hmm.
the prospect of coming in and playing this game. But he really has found a great balance and has managed to infiltrate into so many social circles and create relationships that we haven't even seen, and we're
Yeah.
learning through the exit press that he has these relationships. So overall, I think he is finding an incredible footing that
Hmm.
he's managing to keep the trajectory moving in his favor, unlike some of the people that he's playing with.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, one final thing I want to discuss here is a specific part of the edit as it relates to Liz, because it seems to indicate, if you read the edit a certain way, that she will go out in firemaking, which would be incredibly ironic considering her hot take is that firemaking is good. Uh, Now, the reason I say this is that last week we saw twice that she couldn't get a fire started. And twice over the past 2 weeks, we've seen fire reflected in her glasses, much like we saw with Carson when people pegged it as a reason he would go out
Mm-hmm.
and fire. Now, one problem is I don't see how Liz ends up in fire unless something big happens over the next couple uh, votes. I don't know who would choose to put her in fire making. And also, the editors know that people saw what they did with Carson. So would they really be so obvious by doing it again?
I don't know. She was the one too who also said, "I need someone to start a fire for me."
Right. That was one of the
Yeah.
times that she
Oh,
couldn't
okay.
start the
Yeah.
fire.
So, yeah, I was a little curious about that myself because and maybe now the editors are just messing with us because they know that we're paying attention to these
Mhm.
things and we're all going, "Oh, wait, does that mean something?" And
Right.
they're just chuckling in their back rooms going, "Hee hee hee, they have no idea." But I don't know, maybe. I guess it depends on who the final 4 are
Well, right.
because I know hmm?
Oh, right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, because I know that she's she's someone who hasn't really frustrated anyone besides the one, like, outburst she had about
Mhm.
food. She and Q have really kind of made up, it
Yeah.
appears. And so there's no one who is going to be sitting on that jury that is not liking Liz
Mhm.
and is having some personal issue with Liz, and we've talked about this quite a bit, that sometimes the decision for who wins comes down to who do you like more.
Right.
And if she's someone who hasn't frustrated anyone,
No, that's
then
true.
there are others that could be sitting there going, "Well, she hasn't pissed anyone off who sits over
Mhm.
there. So maybe we don't want her sitting in one of these final 3 spots."
Yeah. Yeah, that's possible.
I don't know. Maybe.
All right. Well, do you have anything else before we move to the next segment?
Considering talking about something, but then I'm like, "You know what? I don't need to frustrate people, so we'll just leave it alone."
Okay. We need to bring back our regular segment. Jeff Probst is wrong about blank.
Mm.
Uh, because the funny thing is that even though we're not to the rules yet, this relates to Venus and her idol. On his podcast, Jeff said it's rarely a mistake when a player doesn't play their idol, but rather the other people outplayed them. I mean, I would say being outplayed is a mistake, but okay. I won't get that
Mm.
nitpicky.
That technical?
Yeah. He even used Hunter as a comparison point. Now, we already discussed over the course of the past 2 weeks that Hunter and Tiffany both clearly should have known that they needed to play their idols.
Mm.
And while I put Venus in a slightly different category that we'll discuss in a few minutes, it turns out still to be more or less true. The only one I'd say was really different this season was Gem. So
Yeah.
sorry, Jeff, but sometimes it most definitely is a mistake. And Jeff Probst is wrong about that.
Well, and I do feel like there is something to be said about each of the players who we've seen. And I know we're going to be going into this in the
Yeah.
rules, but generally, when you have an idol in your pocket, players discuss, well, I don't want to
Mhm.
play it wrong, but I also don't wanna be voted out and sent home with
Yes.
the idol in my pocket, so you kinda weigh the
Mhm.
benefit versus reward. Even if you're wrong, you've at least tried because you've got some type of read on the room. And Hunter and Tiffany and Venus, I don't think it was because they had a read on the room thinking, "I'm good." It was,
Mm.
"I want another chance to use this later because
Well, I think
I
it was
wanna
that they were
stay."
I mean, we just spent, the last 2 weeks discussing, that they did think they were good. It was a
But I
combination.
Right, it is a combination, but it
Yeah.
wasn't just a matter of, like, wh like you said, Gem, I think, is a little bit different, but there was I mean, Hunter was clearly like, "I'm not am I okay? Like, am I good? Like,
He
do
did the
I
math.
just can't."
He did the
He was
math.
trying to do the math, but the math included, "But I would like to be here
Right.
more days, and
Right.
so if I don't play it now, then I get to play it next time."
Right.
There might not be a next time if you don't play it now, and so it is one of those situations where I feel like there was an overemphasis placed on, "I'm pretty sure that I'm okay, but
Yeah.
I would like to be able to play this later, and that'll be my big move," right?
Right.
Where it's like, I
Right.
don't play it now, I hold it, and then I
Yeah.
look like I'm awesome, and then I play it next
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, and Tiffany did hold it once, and it was a great move.
Right.
And then she
Once.
didn't.
Just
Yes.
just do it
Yes.
once.
Yeah.
If you really want that,
Right.
just do it once.
Yeah. All right. Well, there were, of course, other things going on. I'll be putting some of it in my TikToks at David Bloomberg TV. But before we really get to how Venus did, we need to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a shorter and much more colorful version
Yes, they do.
in poster form. And you can find that at robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Scroll down to the poster, click on it, order it, and you'll get it. And I had people
Mhm.
telling me, one woman told me she had it in her office at work, which I thought was very nice. There
That's
was some
great.
people with it on a T-shirt, which you can also scroll down and get.
Love that.
People enjoyed the. I was wearing that T-shirt, and people were like, "Oh, that's great! Is that Eric Reichenbach?" I'm like, "Yes, it is," and I told the whole story.
Mm.
And so, you too can have one of your own on the by going to the website. You can also have the checklist T-shirt, which
Mhm.
Tricky, the designer of that T-shirt, mentioned he had seen a lot of in various places. So, again, go to robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed.
Yes.
All right. Well, Venus said in interviews that if she didn't have that conversation with Charlie, she would have still been in the game. Was that really the key inflection point? More importantly, what led up to that in the weeks prior, such that she was in a situation where a few wrong words could have such a big impact on her game? It's time to figure out why Venus lost. For the past 2 weeks, we've needed to start with the seventh rule instead of the first because it covers idols and advantages in game mechanics. And here we are again.
Yay! One more
Yeah.
time.
This is not only unprecedented on the show, but on this podcast as well.
Yes. You do not like to go out of order.
No.
So I just want everyone to be mindful of that. When you make this decision, this
Yeah.
is a text ahead of time. This is a
Yeah.
prepared Jessica. We are going out of
Right.
order.
We don't do anything on the fly here.
No,
Um,
I'm always like, okay. I'm like, that's fine. I
um,
do appreciate the check-ins, but you always know I'm fine with going out of order.
I know.
I'm
I
okay
know.
with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah, that's one thing I was talking to Lindsay about at Chicago because in the very first episode of the podcast this season, we kept saying through the whole podcast, wait for this rule, wait for this rule, wait for this
Yes.
rule. And I realized in looking back, it was the first podcast of the season. That's why I wanted to go in order. And looking back, it's just like, no, I just should have gone out of order at that point. But who knew?
You live and learn.
Yes. That's what Venus said in some of her interviews.
See,
Uh,
I know.
yeah. So,
Well, let's discuss rule several, shall
yes.
we?
Yes. First, props to Venus for finding the idol. As
Yes.
she said, she knew the area better than the idols because it was the Nami Beach. Also, she knew where Randon found his idol, where Tiffany found hers, which is valuable information in the game because it gave her a leg up on figuring out where to look.
Mm.
Plus, she realized that even once she found the idol, she had to pretend to continue searching so it wouldn't be obvious. And then later turned it into pretending to be so bored with the whole searching thing that it was convincing enough for us to get a long confessional from Kenzie about how Venus wasn't really looking and was just following her around, hoping she'd find it, while Venus was giving hilarious looks to the camera, like
Yes.
her whole, look at her watch thing. And
It was
uh,
very and she was also trying to use that opportunity to, like, throw Q under the bus. Like, he
yes,
must have found it.
yeah,
We haven't found it. He must have found it.
yeah,
I thought that was good too. That was quite creative to
yes.
try to shift the eyes somewhere else.
Yeah. Now, Kenzie did say maybe Venus already found it, but she quickly dismissed the idea about as quickly as she had said it.
Yeah.
Um, the funniest part of her convincing Kenzie that she wasn't really interested in looking was that Venus was apparently the first one to go off and hunt for idols on Nami originally,
Mm.
way back when. Randon told Mike Bloom she was looking from the first day. Quote, I don't even think I said my last name to her and she was gone. She was in the woods searching. The most aggressive day one I have ever seen. So I was like, girl, what's going on right now? My name is Randon. Hello. And she's in the bushes flipping rocks. Um, Now, Venus did
That's
acknowledge in her
incredible.
interviews that everyone was looking for idols. So why try to hide it? Why not just be honest about it?
I do feel like that's where we're at as well. I know that that used to be a big no-no. You didn't wanna go out there and
Hmm.
immediately be pegged as the one looking for idols, and you didn't want people to know that you were looking for idols. Everyone's looking for idols. So at this
Yes.
point,
Well, I mean, not if you were on Bruce's tribe last season, but
well, that's
uh,
true,
but that's
and if you're
exactly it. You need to give yourself a minute, more likely more than a minute, to get to know your tribe mates. Find
Oh, I
out what
don't
their thought
disagree.
process is before you
Yes.
run off and do it. Because you could be in a Bruce like tribe where they frown
Yeah.
upon it and they
Yeah.
immediately want to vote you out if they
Mhm.
think you
Right.
found it.
Yes, and that's it. So it is very important to find out what those parameters are and know if you've got any other person who you can utilize in
Right.
that search to kind of cover for you.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things that you can do, but if you were just immediately going to run out and start looking and kind of just buck the system and whatever, then you might end up
I just want to
finding
make it
yourself in
clear she
trouble.
said buck with a B.
I did say
Yeah,
buck. I
I
was
know. I
clear.
know. I just want to make sure, people heard you right.
Yes, I'm not using bad language, I
No.
promise. So, but yes, I do think that that is a better way to approach the beginning portion of the game. But I do feel like it seems like this group search for idols is becoming more and more um like it just seems to be happening a lot more.
Well,
It
this wasn't
happened
a group
once.
search. This was just an everybody ran off in their own way
But no, no, but that's what I
search.
mean. Like everyone at the same time is like, all right, well, everyone else is looking. We all might as well go look. So
Except
it's like,
Liz.
no,
She was conserving her
she was,
calories.
she
And,
wished she was sleeping.
the way idols have gone this season, who can blame her?
Yeah. So,
So, dreams of Applebee's in her head. Um,
and
so,
hamburgers.
yeah.
Yes.
So after that, we got a Venus confessional with her saying, "No one will ever catch a whiff of me having it. I don't see any benefit in someone knowing that I have this power." And there was applause throughout the theater.
So much, I'm sure.
Yes. And we then saw her telling Kenzie that the worst thing would be if she went home with an idol in her pocket. And I thought, uh-oh.
Uh-huh.
And then in confessional again, she told us it's very much a timing game. Like, when is the right time to play this? And she added, it's so
Like
comforting to have the
this
idol.
time.
Now, I mentioned earlier that after dinner, I agreed with Corey B's prediction she'd be going. By the end of that series of scenes, I knew without a shadow of a doubt
Yeah.
she was a goner.
Yeah. Someone did the same thing on Twitter when I had posted something. They were like,
Hmm.
I think she's going home with an idol in her pocket. This is a weird edit. And
Yeah.
it was definitely very strange because there was so much focus on her mindset about the
Hmm.
idol and what she thought she should do and the continued idol search and just the change in her mannerisms after
Yeah.
she had found the idol versus before. So yes, very, very interesting edit. So
It
I'm
was a
not.
definitely from a high to a low edit, that
Yes.
we
Yeah.
saw. It was like, hey, here's Venus at her highest point, and now we're going to see her crash at the end
Yeah.
because she won't
Yeah.
play it.
Yeah.
Yes, I was not live tweeting, so I could not, do that. I felt we were in a dark theater, so I didn't want to really tweet very much. So yeah,
You're so respectful.
and I wanted to pay attention. So before her interviews, I was telling people that this was, people at the different in Chicago, pretty much,
Mhm.
that this was a different situation than Hunter and Tiffany because both of them should have known they needed to play the idol, while Venus seemed to be in a secure spot until her conversation with Charlie. But sorry to those people I told I'm now changing my position because she said in those interviews that she did actually know she was in danger and thought it was a coin flip. And to me, this makes the decision not to play it even worse.
Mhm.
Because again, not to repeat ourselves, but apparently we have to. Uh, if you
3
have a
times.
whiff that you might be going home, play the idol.
Well, right, and the thing that she even said in her exit press, which I thought was interesting, was that that conversation that she was having with Charlie where she
Hmm.
blames the shift in the vote happening,
Right.
she even knew in that moment
Yeah.
"Oh gosh, stop talking. Stop,
Yes.
stop, stop. This is bad." So if that's your response as you're standing there like, "Ooh, I just messed up," that should give you even all the more reason to play the idol because
Right.
now you've done exactly what you said you weren't gonna do. You kinda let the cat out of the bag that you had
Yes.
something and
You
that
at
something was
least let a
gonna
paw
happen.
out.
Right. So there was a little
Yeah.
hint of something, and this type of don't worry, go ahead with the plan that was before, and I'll tell you
Mhm.
afterwards. It's gonna be great, and then you and I are in the final four.
Mhm.
Nah, it's not gonna jive
No, that
in Survivor. That doesn't work.
yeah, I think her realizing kind of mid-sentence that she was doing the wrong
Mm-hmm.
thing explains some of the way the conversation went, where it
Yes.
seems like she started to tell him and then backed away and didn't really know how to get herself out of that conversation. I mean, I think I don't know about you, but I've been in conversations like that where you kind of start to tell a story and then you realize like, oh crap, I wasn't supposed to tell this person that
Right.
story
Right.
or at
Yeah.
all. I wasn't, and you're like, how do I get out of this? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and
And then there's more questions and it's
right,
awkward and
right,
yeah. Which is exactly what Charlie was doing, and so I
yes,
think if you have that combination where there's a little bit of a thought
hmm
that I might be the one being voted for, and then and you know you've been voted for every tribal
yeah,
up to this point. There you've been like the backup vote or the
hmm
other plan. People have been talking about wanting to vote you out, and then you have this conversation with Charlie where you think, "Oh gosh, now I've just messed up
hmm
and I revealed too much." Yeah, play your idol at that point because there's too many things that are lining up that are, like, questionable, and if you're so good at finding idols, well, then if you're wrong and it gets put back out,
hmm
go find it again.
right,
I know that's easier said than done, but you know
yeah.
what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, she said she did it because she wanted to work with Charlie going forward, and if he had stuck with her against Q this time, they could have used the idol together next time and solidified an alliance
Mm,
to keep moving forward, which would have essentially been her first real alliance. She told Mike Bloom, "I really did come in wanting to play a game of ride or dies and loyalty, and I was trying a lot to form that with Charlie. But the thing is, if she was trying to form trust with Charlie, she either needed to tell him the whole truth or nothing,
right. Right,
not in
because it's too
between.
late at this
Pref-
point.
yeah, preferably nothing, which she even said in other interviews.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, you're right. She came in with that thought. Her brain should have clicked and realized I can't do that anymore because of what just happened.
Yes, and I really do think that at this point in the game it's really too late to try to now establish a ride or die, even if she's been trying all of this
hmm
time to formulate or create this relationship with Charlie. Charlie's already got his number 1 and his number 2, and he has
Well,
those
he's going to vote.
people.
I mean, you always vote out your number one, so it's perfect to become the new number one.
Right, there you are, it's great. So, I just feel like at this point, with the way that Venus's game was going, she really needed to put all of her, like, eggs in her own basket,
hmm
right? Like, she needed to just be like, "This is all about Venus at this point because no one is helping me. They haven't been wanting to help me, and I've been left out or, they've been, just not treating me like I am part of a
Right.
group. I am a number, and they're utilizing that vote." At that point, you really just have to be like, I'm a one person ship at this point, and I
hmm
just need to do this myself." And that's how she should have just left it and not had that conversation. And regardless of what the plan was for the vote, you play your idol just in case because you really are on your own at that point.
Yeah, she also, she told Mike Bloom, I guess this is where my misinterpretation came. I saw it as, ooh, this is an opportunity for the both of us. You get to use this too. I want to work with you. He saw it as, oh, bleep. Venus has something that can screw over my game in the future. And then
Yeah.
she continued, which is fair. I see that point of view. Now, in the moment, I didn't really see that. So I think that was part of it. She knew that she shouldn't have told him, but I think she convinced herself kind of that she had done a good enough job covering it that
Yeah.
he would take it a certain way. But it goes back to something that Jeremy, our guest Jeremy, said last week when he talked about other players being professionals. And, he pointed it out to me and again in our usual text exchange that we saw it this week in the way Charlie immediately knew something was up with Venus. You're
Yeah.
not playing with amateurs here.
Mhm.
you said something that was very weird, and Charlie was like, his antenna, what the heck's going on here?
Yes. And she was frustrated that he then immediately went and told other people,
Right.
but told the people that he has been playing this game with
Right.
at the beginning to say, something's up. Like
Yeah.
there is definitely something going on. And that is a better move for Charlie to make because his loyalty is with other people aside from Venus. He has no loyalty to Venus. And
Right.
so I don't blame him for going and checking in and being like, what do you guys think that was all about?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, to her credit, she added to Mike, I guess it's my delivery. I've come off, as I've come to learn, very sneaky, apparently very cagey, which I didn't know. In my mind, I'd be cheeky and cute, but it doesn't go that way. Uh, she also told Entertainment Weekly, "You live and you learn. Hindsight is 2020, and everyone is beating me up for that conversation I had with him, which I really shouldn't have. Honestly,
Yeah,
it wasn't the correct move. I can see that now watching back."
right. Yeah, she
Uh,
is not wrong about that.
yeah. I do think it's interesting that in the pregame, Venus said her favorite moment was Rob Sesternino turning things on Christie in the Amazon when she was in the middle and wouldn't commit. This isn't quite the same thing, but it is a situation where she started to tell Charlie something, then pulled back and didn't
Mhm.
commit to, one way or the other and made him doubt. So I feel like there's definitely some similarity here.
Yeah, I could see that.
So, all right. Well, now let's go back to the first and most important rule, which is to scheme and plot. And yes, I realize that after 3 unplayed idols leaving in a row, some people would like me to change rule 1 to play your damn idol. But the thing is, scheming and plotting is the omnipresent background to whether or not someone really does need to play their idol. There are, after all, players who've made it to the end while still holding on to their idols because of how they maneuvered their way through the game.
That's fair. Mhm.
That wasn't the situation here.
No.
Indeed, as we just discussed, one reason she wanted to hold on to her idol was so she could try to build something strategic with Charlie. If she had that earlier, some strategic relationships, she wouldn't
Right,
have put herself into this situation.
right.
But she didn't have that earlier. In the words of Tevin to Gordon Holmes, Venus, quote, has excellent strategy. She just doesn't have the social capital or awareness around her. And I think that was a good description and lines up with what I was seeing.
Mm.
Venus has sometimes seemed to know what should or will happen, but she didn't have agency in the decision. Knowing what's happening doesn't matter if she couldn't do anything about it. It's,
Yes. Yes.
it's like someone saying, well, I should win because I was always on the right side of the vote. Okay, great. You were on the right side, but was that just because people used you?
Right. And that I think is the part of Survivor that a lot of people do seem to miss because that argument we hear more often than not. I
Mm-hmm.
was always on the right side of the vote.
Yeah.
Sure, because you were going along with the crowd, you were being told this is what we're doing. You weren't the one that was actually creating the decision. You weren't the one that was leading the charge. You were not the one that was formulating the plot or the plan.
You
And
were
I
a
think that
passenger, not a pilot.
there you go. I mean, I think Venus wanted to be that person, and I do think that she made attempts to have those
Mm-hmm.
conversations, but again, it was too late for her because she was already in a position of people don't trust me, people don't want to
Mm-hmm.
work with me. Something happened at the very beginning of the game with trying to create a relationship with certain players and it didn't work out. And unfortunately for her, those players did have agency and those
Right.
players did have people that wanted to work with them immediately. And that can certainly negatively affect anyone's game. And I do think that it's worth mentioning because one of the things she talked about was how awful it is to be in a game where no one wants to play the game with you.
Mm-hmm.
But also, this is Survivor,
Right.
right? And so those decisions have to be made. And yes, I've felt that when no one wants to play with you and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, this is terrible." And it is not a good feeling, but it's also Survivor.
Right.
And so she ended up in a really terrible position, but that was the position she found herself in. So unfortunately, you have to play from that position and because of that, it just caused the gameplay that she wanted to go by the wayside because she just couldn't without people in her corner.
Right. Yeah. I mean, several times we heard, a few times we heard, I can't even say that word anymore. Darn you, Jelinski,
Zelensky.
who I met and is a really nice guy and took
He
everything
really is. He's great.
super well. Um, but Charlie and Mariah both said things in episode 6 about how smart Venus was and how she had a good mind for the game. And I also suspect this was a big part of where people got the image of her as someone who runs around with different plans, which of course we'll discuss in the second rule. She thought she knew the proper path, and maybe it was the proper path for her in some
Mhm.
cases, but she wasn't able to convince others of it.
Right.
She definitely had plans. Early on, for example, she said she intended to work with Randon, use his beware advantage with him, and then flip at the merge. She also planned to go after Soda and Tevin. And, we saw that she felt she'd led the charge there, while others definitely did not feel that, share that opinion. We've talked about that in the previous episodes, discussing how she didn't seem to understand the perspectives of the other players.
Mhm.
I already quoted her recognizing that now in some circumstances, which I'm glad she realized.
Mm.
And Venus said in her interview with Rob that some viewers thought she was arrogant and delusional and thought she was running the game. I kind of felt called out there, but uh, but she used that as a preface to say that her pitch to others was they should take her because there was no way she was winning. Now, we never saw that, but presuming it's true, it was at least good recognition of where she stood and trying to turn it to her advantage. As she told Mike while laughing like Jessica was just now, uh, I wouldn't say that I was completely doomed. It would take a lot to convince people at the end and to deliver a convincing enough story. As much as I would like to say I would be a zero vote, or as much as people would like to say I would be a zero vote finalist, I think I would have gotten maybe one vote. So,
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I really do feel like there is something to be said about recognizing your place in the
mhm,
game because perception is
right.
reality. And if this is how you are being perceived, regardless of whether or not that's how you are, that's how people in the game are perceiving you. So you can lean in if
Mhm,
that's what they think, or you can try to change that
right.
narrative if you can. It's a very difficult thing, I think, to do. And unfortunately, I feel like Venus leaned in instead of trying to necessarily correct the narrative that had
Mhm,
been created about her. And it just, people built upon it.
yeah.
They had heard this about Venus or they thought this and then, oh, and then they would see this and go, "Well, of course, it's Venus. You can't trust
Mhm,
anything she says." I mean, Ben called her a poser for God's sakes. It
yeah.
just, it's just very it was a very interesting narrative to see be created through other people's representations of Venus, and then you would see Venus acting a certain way and go, "Well, I can kind of understand why someone would think that
Mhm,
because of how she's behaving." But in Venus's mind, that wasn't what she was doing. She's like, "No, I'm doing it because of this." But that's what they were seeing. So you can't correct that narrative if the way that you're acting is adding to that narrative because there's no explanation for the behavior besides what they're seeing.
right, right. All right. Well, before we leave this rule, I do want to mention one more thing. Like so many other people this season, Venus underestimated Charlie as a gamer. She
Mm,
said in this episode that she questioned how strategic and cutthroat he could be. Well, he was pretty dang strategic and cutthroat when he out schemed her here.
yeah, 100%. And I think that that speaks volumes of him
Right,
recognizing what people think about him
right,
and that he is not the strategic
hmm
mastermind and he's leaning in on that.
right. All right. Well, we could move to the second rule, and it says to, or not to, scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. As I mentioned earlier, Venus told Mike Bloom she has now learned she comes off as sneaky and cagey, which she didn't know. And indeed, that was a big theme of what players said about her, plus her apparently coming to different people with different plans. Buckle up, there's a lot here. Kenzie said in episode 8, no one really enjoys working with her. No one trusts her. Kenzie later told Charlie, Venus is chaos. I don't want Venus here either. Liz told Maria this week, the only person talking to me is Venus, and I don't believe anything she says. She's so all over the place. Maria replied, that's another reason I can't work with her. I can't understand her game at all.
Mm,
Tevin had previously said, Venus is flipping and flopping and is threatening to my alliances. Charlie said in episode 7, Venus is totally chaotic and unpredictable. I don't think I can trust her with anything. Charlie later said, Venus, I don't trust. She'll cause some random chaos. Maria added, Venus isn't someone I can work with. Ben told Charlie in this episode, she's just causing more and more chaos. She freaks out before every tribal council, and she's always running around trying to pitch some crazy plan. I'm sick of being around that. And of course, there was the exchange with Q at this tribal council, where he said, everybody here knows to never, ever, 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 ever say a name in front of Venus. She'll come up to you aggressively. What do you want to do? She'll run and tell this person, Liz said this person, Q said this. He later added that she didn't know about the Tiffany vote because they didn't trust her. Now, for her part, she had some very nice comebacks to him. But the point here is about how everybody viewed her. And
Mm-hmm.
that continued from her conversation with Charlie, where he saw her as being super shifty. And, he was trying to set up a Final Four deal, but she was stonewalling him on something incredibly important, which is a huge red flag.
Yes. Yes. And at this point in the game, when you were trying to maneuver and determine who's going to be in that final four, this is not the time that you want to be perceived as cagey or like you're hiding
Mm-hmm.
something. And you do not want to almost give that person an ultimatum. Like, no, 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 no. Trust me. Trust me. Where you just do what I'm telling you to do. And then I'll tell you later after this vote and
Mm-hmm.
I'll share with you what I've got and
Yeah.
we'll make it to the final four. It doesn't work
Mm-mm.
in the relationship that you've already created and the type of player that you are believed to be to then be having that conversation that type of promise
Mm-hmm.
really requires some type of loyalty that you've built throughout the entire game. You can't
Yeah.
come in on day 21, I think we're at, or whatever it is at
Yeah.
this point, and try to do that. Unfortunately for her, she just was not in a position to do anything of the sort. And also, I think she mentioned in one of her exit interviews that she thought that if she could pull this off and get Charlie on her side, that would be a great argument for her at the end. So she pulled
Mm-hmm.
Charlie in, pulled off this move, saved her idol, used it in the final 5, and ta-da, look at me,
Mm-hmm.
and then she would have more to talk
Yeah.
about in the final 3. And I understand that. You wanna have
Mm-hmm.
a resume and you wanna have those moves, but at this point, for her, it's a little too late. She just
Well,
couldn't do that.
I know, but that was, I mean, like she said, that was her only hope. She knew
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
So
for
yeah,
sure.
I see her going for it, just not with what happened.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
so now going back to all those things that everyone said about her, and I know that was a lot to read, but the show clearly wanted us to know that this was what everybody thought of Venus.
Right. Right. Yeah.
This was not just one or two people. And I know Venus said in her interviews that Tevin and Q poisoned the well with everyone about her. But we saw at least some of the actual behavior too. I
Mm,
mean, we could
mhm.
go back to Murgatory in episode 6 when she massively overplayed while trying to change the target to Charlie from Mariah. As Hunter told Mike Bloom, she was working so hard to get herself out of the game. The way she was scrambling, everyone was like, Venus, we cannot work with her.
Right.
Now, in many cases, and I said it at the time, this would have resulted in her becoming the target then. But Hunter said he went to bat for her. And instead, people also saw her as being so obvious that they didn't worry about her.
Right.
You know, for her part, Venus told Mike that everything the others said about her, quote, they were doing themselves, but they were doing it with a very false veil of a fake positivity. I was the only one who was doing what they were doing, but I was, or yeah, but I was being open and honest about it. And I mentioned a few weeks ago that she also tweeted, I'm never going to be the player that sits quietly with a stupid grin and plays dumb. If your strategy is bad, I will tell you. But that's
But
the
that's
thing
not how
about,
you play
right.
Survivor.
That's the thing about this rule. A huge part of it, it's right there in the subtitle, is keep your scheming secret. You should
Right.
not be telling people if they have a bad strategy. You should not be all open and honest about your scheming.
Mhm.
It's like we were talking about with the idol a minute ago. Yes, everyone does it to one extent or another, but
Mhm.
you do it quietly.
Yes. Smile and nod.
Yes.
Always say yes. These are all things that we've
Yes.
talked about. Yeah, you can Survivor is not the time to point out someone's faults or flaws to their face
Right.
because you're playing a game for $1,000,000. So, as much as it's infuriating you and as much as someone might be driving you crazy, you don't tell them that to their face. You don't say that. You use the confessionals to do that. You use your next closest ally who
Mhm.
you can trust if you want to talk about someone. But unfortunately, this idea that honesty is the best policy because this is who I am and I'm real and I'm not going to pretend.
Mhm.
Well, no, you have to pretend, right?
Yeah.
Right, Bloomberg? You have to
Yes.
pretend just a little bit.
Just a
I
little
believe it's
bit
in one of
or a
your
lot.
rules.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get there too. But yes. But first, we have the third rule, which tells players to be flexible. So, how do you think Venus did here?
Well, this one is really interesting, right?
Hmm.
Because I feel like you just mentioned like trying to shift the vote to Maria at a moment in time when she didn't need to do that, right? She was overplaying and she was
Mariah. Mariah.
Mariah. I'm so sorry, Mariah. So Mariah, Maria, there's so many names, but at that point, that was unnecessary. So it's like she's trying to come up with these other ideas and these other game mechanics or game moves that she wants to introduce and have other people do. But again, it goes back to what you had said previously. She had no one working with her. So it makes it very difficult for you to then say, "Oh no, but how about this plan?"
Hmm.
I I think she wanted to be someone who was like, "I'm willing to do the craziest thing and I'm willing to make all of the crazy moves and do things that no one expects." But to do that, you need to have people working with you. And so when you're trying to be flexible and everyone's looking at you going, well, we can't trust her because she runs
Hmm.
around and is like coming up with all these crazy ideas at the last minute and trying to make us vote different ways. You really can't be flexible when you're
Right.
in the position that Venus was in.
Yeah. You know, I agree. It's an interesting, situation with her because on one hand, Venus said in her interviews that she would have been a good ally in part because she was open minded to change and didn't let grudges stop her from working with someone.
Sure.
I think that's probably true in some cases. But then there were other cases like Murgatory, when she pushed so hard to go after Charlie, even though she had been told it was either herself or Mariah.
Mhm.
You know, so again, not flexible at that point. And of course, there was Q, who she specifically said in tribal council she wouldn't voluntarily work with, although the feeling was mutual anyway, and it's understandable. But you can't have it both ways. You can't say I don't hold grudges and I do
Mhm.
anything and then have that. Still,
Right.
I don't think we can really say she was flexible in that she seemed to have very specific ideas about who targets should be and shared that with, from what we heard, anyone who would listen. It's
Yes.
it's great to have strategic ideas. It is not so great to be so openly steadfast.
Yes. Great way to put it.
Thank you. The fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control them. This is a bit of a tough one for me also
Mm.
because it really did seem like a lot of Venus's decisions were wrapped up in how she felt about a person, especially her original Nami tribe mates. As I mentioned, she said she didn't hold grudges and also added in her interviews that she tried talking to some of her Nami tribe mates before they were voted out. But it's very hard to judge because it also made strategic sense from her point of view to go along with a vote against people who she felt were not going to work with her.
Right.
So I can't say it's because of emotional reasons because it, could have been strategic.
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember if there was any vote situation where we saw her target someone or not specifically for emotional reasons. Can you think of anyone?
I can't really. I think what she really was attempting to do on so many decisions she was making was she wanted to be in charge. She
Mhm.
wanted she wanted to be the leader. She wanted people to follow her.
Everybody did. They have it's got to be my move or else I'm going to
Right.
spend 10 minutes in confessional talking about it.
Yes, and so I think that that was where her decisions were really coming from. It was this idea that I want the move and I need to make this move and I want people to do what I want to do. And it was more of this idea of what Survivor is supposed to be, I
Mhm.
feel, where you come into Survivor thinking, "Boy, I'm gonna make all the moves," and then when I'm in final 3, they're just gonna look at me and be like, "Oh my god, look at all the things that you did." But that wasn't what was happening for her
Right.
at all, and so I don't think it came from a place of emotion. I think it came from a place of wanting to play this game in that way, but she couldn't play this game in that way because she was not in a position to do
Right.
so.
Right. Okay. Well, the fifth rule reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game.
Hey, there's that word pretend.
Yeah. Yeah. We might have a little bit to talk about here. Um, let's start in the pregame. When Venus said she worried that people would have a negative first impression of her, so she'd have to turn them around quickly. Fast forward to her post-game interviews. She said that while she understands having a bad first impression, she didn't expect people to hold a grudge for so long. So clearly, the whole turning them around quickly thing didn't quite work out.
Yeah.
Um, as I mentioned earlier, she also said Tevin and Q poisoned the well against her, and there was no rhyme or reason for them to hate her. She told Mike Bloom, imagine the two most charismatic, talkative people on the island saying nothing but negative things about you, always having your name in their mouth and always saying that
Mm,
you are chaos, you are sneaky, you are untrustworthy. Other people
mhm.
will internalize that, especially if they don't give you a chance to actually talk to you and get to know you as a person. They will internalize whatever the loudest voice in the room says to them. And that is something that I suffered with the entire game. It was very much the scarlet letter on me.
Yeah.
Well, look,
Well, but that's part of Survivor, right? You're either
yeah,
gonna connect with people or you're not gonna connect with
right.
people, and you have to try to figure out how to connect with the people that you're put on the tribe
Yes,
with.
yes. Here's the thing, we obviously weren't there. But
Right.
when 5 people on your original tribe say you are acting a certain way, and then a whole bunch more people at the merge say it too, while you are the only one saying it's everybody else, I can't say 100% which perspective is the correct one, but it only makes sense to lean heavily in a particular way.
Yeah, I think majority might rule here,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah,
And and again, I this particular tribe that she was on had some very big personalities
right.
on it, right? And so that in and of itself can affect the dynamics and it
Mhm.
can affect the just the atmosphere and the way that people react to each other and the way that they connect with each other. But you look at someone like Hunter, who I don't think he appreciated all of the singing. We could do something as
Mhm.
silly as the singing, but he
Right.
just kind of sat back and was like, "Oh, this
Mhm.
is what I'm dealing with now," and didn't let it get in the way, and
Right.
was able to live within what was created for him, like,
Yeah.
within that tribe. If you are fighting against that, as I feel like she was probably doing, that's not going to gain any traction either. If you either have to pretend that all of this is fine,
Mhm.
and if you don't immediately connect with someone, that's okay, but you can't let that become your whole existence with this person. You have to
Right.
try to create something else because you don't have a choice. You really don't have a choice, especially when you have such big personalities that you're playing with.
Yeah, a perfect example. Soda told Mike Bloom, Venus would come to me and say, nobody likes me. Nobody wants to talk to me. And
Mhm.
Soda said, I'm like, you have to go out and try to change that. And Soda continued, I was really just on the receiving end of a lot of things, like her toe getting run over was apparently my fault.
Mhm.
It's a lot of me going, your feelings are valid. I understand. And just kind of absorbing this. By the end of
Mhm.
day 2, it's night out, and she asked to talk to me by the boats. And she was like, I can see you're not talking anymore. It's very obvious. No one's talking to me. No one's working with me. Hunter gets to go off into the woods, no problem. But I do it, and everybody like has a problem. And I'm like,
Mhm.
listen to me. You're not Hunter. You're you. You have to figure out how you are going to move and adjust. If people
Right.
are not messing with you and wanting to live with you, you need to figure that out. I can't do that for you. So, Soda was telling her the same thing you just said, basically. You have to
Mhm.
figure out what to do with these people.
Yeah. Because you're not going to like everyone that you play this game with.
Right.
It's a given because these are people you've never met before and these are people that you might never be with again in your life, but you have to live with them. You have to be with them 24/7. So you need to find something. You need
Yeah.
to pretend as much as you can to
Mhm.
tolerate this person and to not make it appear as if you're frustrated. And on top of it, if you are sharing with other people that this is what's happening and this is
Mhm.
how you feel and this is what's being done to you, you don't know if that person's going back and
Right.
telling this other person. And not for nothing, but if Tevin knows that this is getting under her skin, maybe Tevin's gonna keep doing that, right? Because why not? This is, again, a game for $1,000,000. So if you learn something about someone that's making them frustrated and
Mhm.
really bothering them, now you might just be like, "Okay, duly noted. Keep
S
keep doing
some of
that."
us might do that to people in real life even.
I'm
Um,
right. I mean, these things happen.
yeah. Um, now, yeah, you mentioned Tevin because we know, as Venus mentioned, that Tevin was not a fan. He flat out said on the show, "Venus brings tribe morale down." But even so, we heard from him in his exit press how he tried to pull her aside and straighten things out, but their perspectives just never meshed.
Mhm.
He he tried to explain the problems, and she just told him he was interpreting what she was doing wrong. Now on Twitter, Emperor of Chocolate, I want to be the Emperor of Chocolate. Um,
Emperor of chocolate? I'm
yes,
disappearing for a minute. I'm just going down to get paper.
I thought you were going to get chocolate after I brought
No,
that
but
up.
that would have been
Okay,
lovely.
yeah. Asked me a few weeks ago, do you reckon it's more of a her problem or everyone else problem? Because I'm
Mm,
thinking it's an everyone problem. Venus doesn't like them, and they all don't like her. So no one really wins in this situation. And I
mm.
responded that in Survivor, if it's an everyone else problem, then it's a you problem.
Oh my
There,
gosh, you just
there's
made me think of something. Go
okay,
ahead.
yeah, there is no objective who's right and who's wrong. There's just who has the votes. And that was the issue in Tevin's story as well. She felt she was right and they were all wrong, according to Tevin's story again.
Mhm.
And, as she told them they had the wrong perspective, she didn't seem to recognize that it didn't matter. She had to acknowledge their point of view and make the necessary changes.
Yeah.
Because according to what Tevin told Dalton Ross, every person on Nami tried to be very nice. They didn't show how much Soda was bending backwards for Venus. They didn't show Liz being extraordinarily nice. They didn't show Randon
Mhm.
going out of the way. Well, they did show it a little bit. I'm going out of my way. Hunter's going out of his way. We all went out of our way to really try to make her feel comfortable. And we had to talk one night about how she wasn't being heard. And we really listened to her, but it didn't work out.
Yeah. So this just reminds me, and you have to forgive me because I'm flipping through all of my
Yeah,
papers
apparently you've
on
got
I
every
I have so
yeah.
many papers. But this reminds me there was a comedian whose name I can never remember, but he was very famous back in the, I'm gonna just say it, the early 90s. Oh my gosh, can you believe that?
Hmm.
But one of the jokes that he actually made, which I love, and he is this very, like, kind of just dry, like, dull affect when he would talk, but
Mhm.
he would say he would just kinda do, like, drop, like, one-liners, and it was, "My mother used to always tell me that there was always one weird person on the school bus, and I could never find them."
Yeah.
So it's like, that's one of these types of moments where
Yeah.
you're like, it has to be everyone else, it can't be me, but no, maybe it really is. Maybe
Well,
it really is
there's a
you.
saying in poker too. If you sit down at the poker table and you look around and you can't find the fish at the table and the fish is the bad player, you're
Mm,
the fish.
yeah,
So,
it
but
happens.
uh, in this case, it's a little bit different in that it's a matter of perspectives, not necessarily hard objective facts, but
Sure.
perspective turns into a hard objective fact in Survivor.
Yes.
Um, now Venus continued in talking to Mike Bloom, saying, "In the game of Survivor, there's no reason to ostracize an individual person." But you got into this somewhat already. The thing is, it's a game, and while I
Mhm.
agree there are certain things people shouldn't do, even in a game, unfortunately, ostracizing someone within the confines of the game is indeed a viable strategy. Is it mean? Yeah. But
Yes.
so is denying someone a food reward. And we discussed that last week and you talked about it earlier. That's part of the game as well.
Yeah.
You went through this. People on your tribe turned on you.
Yes. Yes, and it sucks, and I can tell everyone who wants to play Survivor, it hurts. Emotionally, you're like, this is awful. And
Mhm.
you don't ever want to be in that type of situation, but you have to keep telling yourself, but this is a game for $1 million. So I'm going to eat crow. I'm going to get back out there and I'm going to act like it doesn't bother me. And I'm still going to try to formulate a relationship with somebody. I have to figure this out.
Mhm.
And like, that was one of those moments that I was like, I need Ken. Ken's he's going to be what's going to save me here. I need to figure out how I'm going to build that relationship. That's what you have to do. It's everything in Survivor it's like a reaction to what is happening. They're ripple effects, and you have to make sure that you are responding in kind. You can't mope, you can't complain, you can't be like, "Oh, it's I don't understand. What am I doing wrong?" Well, you got to figure it out, because if you don't figure it out, then this is the type of
Well,
thing that's going to happen to you.
and it's worse. I mean, I don't from what we saw and heard, it wasn't even, "I don't understand, what am I doing wrong?" It's, "They don't understand, I'm not doing
Yeah.
anything wrong."
Right. Right. Mhm.
Which,
Yeah.
that kind of is even worse.
Yeah.
Um, so now I have another litany of, thoughts from other players in the game, much like I had in the second rule, where just to show that, it wasn't just 1 or 2 people, almost everybody felt similar about her.
Mm. Mhm.
Tiffany told Rob, "Venus had a rough time out there because she's opinionated and someone who won't bite her tongue. But in a game like Survivor, sometimes you have to bite your tongue."
Mhm.
Q said, "Venus is the problem for all the complaining and the pushing and the running to tell this story to this person." And yes, before anyone writes in, I know it's very funny for Q, of all people, to say that, but still,
Right.
just shows another thing.
Right.
Ben said, "The negative vibes are a bit much." Maria said back in episode 7, "Venus is pretty oblivious. She isn't reading the room." Eh, Just overall, she didn't make good social bonds.
Mhm.
As Hunter said in his mid-season Entertainment Weekly interview, "I thought it was strange just how quickly she began to isolate herself, even in terms of simple things." Uh, he gave an example of how he and Tevin and Soda went crab hunting, and Venus chose not to join in, to the point that after a week, she didn't even know where they went to catch crabs.
Mm.
Uh,
Mhm.
Hunter also told Gordon Holmes Venus didn't connect in any way other than trying to talk strategy.
Yeah. And again, good as far as you wanna play Survivor and you need to
Right.
strategize. Bad if you are not creating the social bonds that you need in order to carry through with that strategy. You
In
can't
order to
win
play
this game by
Survivor. Yeah.
yourself.
Right.
Right, you cannot play this game by yourself. And I do love that you use the word agency, because if no one is working with you, you could have the greatest plan in the world.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter if you are all by yourself.
Right.
You can't carry the day with one vote. You just can't.
Yeah. Yeah. She could have been right about every single thing about who should go next, but it
Mhm.
doesn't matter if you can't get anyone to listen to you.
Right.
Um, and, another reason that she had problems in this rule, and this was something you've already alluded to a couple times, is she simply didn't seem to want to pretend to be nice.
Yeah.
She made that clear in a few tweets a little while ago, such as saying, "I was well aware of who had an alliance and was being completely iced out. Of course, I'm blunt of how they're being perceived. Why beat around the bush?" And also, "I want you all to ask yourself, would you try and kiss the asses of people who have made zero effort to get to know you and have already made up their minds about you? Answer, you wouldn't."
Yes, you
And,
would when you play
well,
Survivor.
one, yes, you would. And also, they're saying that that's not the case, you
Yeah.
know. And also, any schmoozing would have made exactly zero difference. Rather save my dignity because that's worth much more to me than $1 million. But the thing is, a good social game can, in fact, change your circumstances.
Mhm.
And we heard earlier that Venus said the path to winning wasn't closed for her. So why not try to open it up just a little bit more?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I, I think some of this, maybe most of this, comes down to what Jeff said in his On Fire podcast a few weeks ago. And I mentioned this at the time, but just to bring it back, the way he said that the way Venus was acting made more sense when you know her backstory of being an activist for women in Iran who calls BS when she sees it. And yeah,
Mhm.
she told Rob that the reason she was on the show was to represent the women of Iran.
Mhm.
She told Mike, I went into this game saying, yes, I could play the safe game and be quiet, or I can use my voice the way I want to, the way I'm advocating for other women to. Be that confident person that I see in Iran. The confident women there who are speaking their minds and putting their own lives at reach or at risk. This is such a tiny thing in comparison. Of course, I'm going to speak my mind. Of course, I'm going to come off as arrogant. I don't care. But the last thing I'm going to do is censor myself and to remove myself of my own agency in the game. Now, again, I mentioned this when it first came up on Jeff's podcast. But as we've said about similar situation, all of that is great. It is important in the real world.
Yes.
This is not the real world. This is still Survivor. People are playing a game. I support her activism. I support calling BS when she sees it in everyday life. This isn't everyday life. One thing that a number of fans told me in Chicago was that a reason they like this podcast is we tell it like it is and we don't hold back. So, of course, I'm in favor of that. But that's us talking about Survivor, not us playing Survivor. And playing the game literally has different rules.
Yes. And I agree wholeheartedly with you that I have so much respect for what she wants to do, the message that she wants to put out into the universe, and how she wants to represent women. Hi, I'm a woman. Totally agree with all of that. I think everything that she's saying is spot on in the real world, as you said. 100% that's the way it should be. And I think that it is a great way to exist. And I have so much respect for that. But again, Survivor makes you have to make decisions that you would not make in your real life. I wouldn't choose to like lie to someone to their face about something in the real world, but in Survivor, that's what you do. And it's uncomfortable. And you're like, oh, I'm literally lying to this person's face right now. But that's what you have to do in Survivor. And so you have to always remind yourself this is not the real world. You can still have you can represent everything you want to represent and you can be that person. But when you're playing this game, it's different. And it's a hard thing to maneuver. It's a hard thing to work through because it doesn't feel right. You're like, this is not how I'm supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be lying to people and I'm not supposed to be manipulating and I'm not supposed to be conniving and sneaky. But then you realize, well, so that's what everyone else is doing. So I have to do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Venus even said to EW when she was talking about the idol, but it applies there. I think that's the common theme of the season is I should have just kept my mouth shut. Now, obviously, she wouldn't have been as entertaining to so many fans, but again, that's not what these rules are about.
Right.
All right. Well, the sixth rule warns against being too much of a threat. And for a long time, we talked about her continuing to scoot by as a lower level threat. And of course, I, thought she'd be a 0 vote finalist for that reason. When Tiffany convinced Tevin not to go after Venus, she pointed out that nobody took her seriously. So who cared if she mentioned his name? Right. And then Tiffany added to us, Venus thinks she's a power player, but she's really not. I think I'd rather deal with a nuisance than a threat.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that there is a lot to be said about making that decision because if, again, she has nobody that's working with her, you don't need to worry about what she's going to structure or who she's going to target because it will just be Venus with this idea, even though she might be telling people that's not going to be the plan in the end. In the end, it's going to be a different plan that a different group of people are going to put together. And maybe it was the same plan that Venus came up with. And we saw that happen.
Right. Yes.
But they were all targeting the same person. And so it is one of those situations where, unfortunately, you don't always pull off the moves that you want. You think you might have pulled off the move, but, really in the end, it might just be the other group that's doing it.
Now, moving up to this week, Ben specifically said his reason for wanting Venus to go had nothing to do with her being a threat. She was just causing more and more chaos. But the thing is, causing chaos can be threatening in some situations.
Yes.
Charlie was trying to build something to move forward. That group needed to be solid and trustworthy, at least, to whatever point that means in Survivor. You can't have a wild card in that situation. You can't have someone suddenly revealing that they have something, but not telling you what.
Right.
Venus thought she would build trust with Charlie through her revelation. It had the exact opposite effect, and it made her into a potential threat to him.
Yes. And that is something that we've talked about a lot, is that you
Mhm.
can become a threat to
For
other
different
people's
reasons.
games for
Yes.
different reasons, and being someone who creates chaos can definitely be a concern, hence Q being such
Yes.
a concern.
Yes. All right. Well, we can move to Appendix A, which is about the players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And we talk about voting out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. We're still at the part of the game where players should typically be targeting strong threats. In this case, although we just discussed how Venus was a threat in certain ways, I wouldn't have put her at the top of the list
Right.
for most people. But for Charlie, well, he was really the deciding factor. Kenzie said to Charlie in this episode that it's foolish not to take out the biggest threat in the game while he's vulnerable. But there are several layers to this. Is Q really the biggest threat in the game? Can he win the game? If not, then he's not the biggest threat in the game overall.
Right.
Second, Charlie doesn't necessarily want the biggest threat out yet because that starts leading people closer to him. Because he is indeed keeping his end goal in mind, as this appendix says.
Mhm.
And we just discussed how Venus's perceived chaos could have messed with that end goal and his plan.
Well, and that's an interesting point too, because we just talked about how Q is creating chaos as
Mm-hmm.
well. But I think the difference between Q in the current position he's in is he's tight with Maria, and
Right.
Maria is tight with Charlie. So there is a little bit of control that exists there for Charlie when it comes to Q through Maria. But then when you're talking about Venus, there isn't that,
There's
right?
no
There
control.
there is
Yeah.
there's no control. And so this is why when you are looking at the two choices, chaos bad, chaos
Yeah.
can definitely be a threat, but who is more of a threat to Charlie in that moment? It's the one that he can't control. And he has
Yes.
no idea. When Venus is like, I'll tell you later. Trust me.
Yeah.
Really? I'm supposed to trust you now?
Yeah.
So, yes, I mean, that's what I think the decision really boils down to.
Yeah. There's a saying that it's on the tip of my tongue right now. Oh, yeah. No, I know. It's so when I was going to grad school, I had been accepted to two schools. One was the University of Illinois, where I was already going for undergrad, and one was another school, actually in upstate New York. We could have been neighbors. But
Sure.
hmm?
What school?
Alfred University.
Really? That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
And so I was debating which professor to go with. And in the end, my decision came down to because the professor that I was with in undergrad, he wasn't amazing. He was good, but he had issues, or I had some issues with him. But I didn't know anything about the other professor at all.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so my choice was better the devil you know than the devil
Then
you
the
don't.
devil you don't. Exactly.
And
Mm-hmm.
in this case, that's what you've got with Q and Venus. Better the devil you at least know somewhat than the one who's telling you, I have something, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Right, right, right. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we could go to Appendix B, which is the jury phase. And it's clear that some of these players are indeed thinking ahead to who they want to be up against when facing the jury. None of them really seemed to worry about facing Venus. And we discussed earlier how even she said she was pitching herself as someone who couldn't win. But each person has their own plan on how to get to the end.
Right, right.
As Charlie said, you're thinking about who are you putting on the jury? Who are you leaving in the game to work with you? And at this point in the game, who am I going to sit next to at the end and have the jury judge me against?
Mm-hmm.
Everything has consequences.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that this is the time that those decisions matter so much
Mm-hmm.
because you have to not frustrate the people that you're also putting over there.
Right.
And because they're going to be going into Ponderosa talking about what you did or what you didn't do or promises that were made. And so it is a very, very tricky thing to maneuver at this point. And the fact that Charlie is kind of working through the permutations of that, I think speaks volumes to his knowledge of the game, his
Mm-hmm.
understanding of the game, and how he needs to approach every decision that he's making.
Yeah. I mean, as much as people might have wanted to have Venus at the end with them, they couldn't rely on her helping them get to the end. And that, especially
Right.
again, when it comes to Charlie.
Right. And also, just, to put this out there,
Mm-hmm.
knowing how Venus is viewed or perceived by other people who are at Ponderosa, who are
Mm-hmm.
on the jury, your choice between who do you want to put on the jury? Do you want to put Venus or do you want to put Q? Q is frustrating everybody too, but like if she goes back to Ponderosa, how much of a negative impact is that necessarily going to have on your game if it's decided that, well, Charlie's the reason why I'm sitting
Right.
here? It might not have that much of an effect on the other people who are in
Yeah.
Ponderosa if it's coming from Venus.
Yeah. All right. Well, it is about time to wrap things up. So, what are your final thoughts on Venus?
Listen, there was a reason why I was flipping through all of these papers and trying to find what I needed to find, because there's a very significant moment that Venus provided to us in her pregame press.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the way she described herself, or the way that her friends described her. They would describe me as someone with a really tough exterior, but a secret softy. And when she talked about that really tough exterior, she said, think Regina George from Mean Girls. And if anyone is familiar with Regina George from Mean Girls, that is really not the person you want to be emulating when you're playing the game of Survivor. I'm just putting that
Mm-hmm.
out there. And so I really did think at the beginning, there was something about Venus that was it was mesmerizing. I was like, boy, I could really get
Mm-hmm.
behind her. Like she really
And
she's
many
got a
people did.
presence. Right. She has a presence about her. She is confident. She has so many things working in her favor that I was like, gosh, I really want to get behind her. And I even said, if anyone could pull off a Parvati, it's her. Because that is a very difficult balance to find
Mm-hmm.
where you can be perceived a particular way, but you're still able to work it and you're able to make it get you further in the game. And I thought, boy, and then at the beginning when somebody actually said, she's another Parvati. We got to watch out for her. I was like, "Oh my gosh, here we go. Like this is going to happen." And I was so excited about that. But again, it is all about the group of people that you are with, right? And she didn't find herself with a group of people that were excited about a Parvati being on their tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And that drew concern because everyone has seen how well she plays the game. And so I do think that she needed to come at this from a different perspective because people have already seen how well Parvati was able to manipulate and be sneaky and pull things off and still get so far and then win. So I think in a group like this that is so well educated on the game, that are super fans, that know Survivor in and out, someone like Venus walking in and then having this persona and having this confidence and having this thing about her, boy, that's going to be scary right off the rip,
Yeah.
right? And so when you have someone like Tevin who's on your tribe and he sees this, I don't blame him for being like, I got to knock her down a few pegs right now because I need to be the Parvati. Like, I need to be the one that everyone is looking at, not her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really do think that, unfortunately for Venus, her own persona and the way that she wanted that people do perceive her as Regina George is scary as hell. And so I don't blame everyone for really kind of going, oh my goodness, because she didn't soften it. She didn't
Mm-hmm.
try to make it not that way. She leaned in on that Regina George type of person. And I think really it caused her very soon demise in this game. And then that's just what kind of carried through the whole way for her. So, unfortunately for Venus, again, I appreciate her advocacy. I love what she wants to do in the world and what she wants to represent. All of that's fantastic. But this is Survivor. And unfortunately, Survivor does not play by real world rules. It's played by David Bloomberg's rules. And you have to remember that when you are playing Survivor. And unfortunately, I don't think Venus did.
No. No. Well, for the past 2 weeks, I've noted that the players who lost should have known they needed to play their idols, but they were fooled or fooled themselves. And now I have to say it for a third time. Venus indicated that she knew it was a risk to not play her idol, but she went with it because she wanted to solidify something going forward. The problem was that keeping a secret after revealing that she had a secret to keep was exactly the wrong way to solidify something. I mentioned earlier that Venus said if she hadn't had the conversation with Charlie, where she suggested she had the idol, she'd still be in the game. And I do think she's right about that. But of course, that's not the whole story. Venus had significant problems integrating both socially and strategically into her original tribe and then into the game as a whole after merge. Almost every other player said things indicating that they felt she was chaotic, untrustworthy, and or they just couldn't work with her. She sometimes, maybe often, had good ideas and reads on what would work for her, but she just didn't have the social or strategic connections, the agency to give her the ability to make those things happen. Part of the reason was that she was going to speak her mind and tell people what she thought. That could be admirable in real life, and certainly was one reason she had so many fans, but Survivor is not real life. And being that way can just shoot a player's entire game in the foot. Yes, Venus needed to play her idol. But if she had built solid bonds earlier instead of causing pretty much everyone to worry about playing with her, she wouldn't have found herself in the situation where she felt she needed to use it in the way she had planned. And that is why Venus lost.
Here we are. Just need to say this. What is with your shirt?
Oh, well, I was going to get to that, but so this was, I meant to mention it in the Chicago thing for people not watching the video. My shirt says pizza and hot dogs. F yeah. And of course, that's a Chicago thing, pizza and hot dogs. You got Chicago style
All
pizza.
right.
But this was actually a quote, a tweet from Simone Biles when her husband was signed to the
Okay.
Chicago Bears recently.
Okay. All right. Because I was
This
like,
is one of my many shirts from the Obvious Shirt store, which I mentioned on the RHAP Facebook group. I was trying to get people to go there, but I did a poor job of organizing it, and also a poor job of planning it because it was on the opposite side of Wrigley Field from where we were. I went there afterwards to visit myself
okay.
because all of my purchases have been online up to this point. But yes, this was a special Obvious shirt.
Okay. All right. Now that explains it. Because I'm like, pizza and hot dogs. What is this all about?
Yes. All right. Well, before we get to our predictions for next episode, I want to remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in poster form and t-shirt form, not obvious t-shirt form, just t-shirt form, and
Mm-hmm.
also as a checklist. So again, go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, click on whatever you would like to purchase, and then, do it.
Buy it.
Order everything.
Love it.
Uh,
It's great.
so
It's a good deal.
yes. So where can people reach us if besides
I'm sorry. I was
besides
just looking at the calendar trying to
Yeah.
figure out like what's happening with the rest of because we're down to 5, right?
No.
6, 5.
Worry about that afterwards. We'll get to
Okay.
predictions.
Okay. All right. So if you are interested in finding more out about me, I am at Jessica Lewis 89 on Twitter, and David Bloomberg is at David Bloomberg. I must say he's a little more vocal than I am. I like to live tweet during the episodes, and then I get lost with all of my work stuff during the week. However, every once in a while I jump in there. So again, at Jessica Lewis 89 on Instagram, I'm at Jessica Lewis 6789. And David Bloomberg also has Instagram. He also has everything else under the sun that you can imagine, hence his link tree in order to find David Bloomberg at all of the places that he exists. So, David, take it away.
Yes, I am at linktree/David Bloomberg. In the URL, there's a dot before the EE. Or you can find me more directly on Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg, on Threads as at David Bloomberg TV. And I'm at David Bloomberg TV there because it's connected to Instagram, and at David Bloomberg TV is also my Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube name. On all of those, I've been posting 2 or 3 videos per day. Right now, I'm posting, obviously, clips from US Survivor, plus shows like The Circle, which just finished up, Deal or No Deal Island, which is about to finish up, The GOAT, with Wendell. He's on that. That's an Amazon Prime show. And I watched the first 3 episodes, and there are lots of little clippable moments there. So I'm looking forward to that. Deal or No Deal Island. You know, Boston Rob just broke a rule and got in trouble. And so
Ooh.
I on what was it, Thursday morning, I posted a clip about that, and then I went on my way. I had breakfast with a few people, and then drove back home. And by the time I got home, it had like over 100,000 views. I'm like, holy moly! So yes, apparently people like to see Boston Rob breaking the rules, or
There
they're
you go.
mad at it. Either way, they view it, so that's what counts.
That's
Uh,
great. Good
but
for you.
again, you can find everything at Linktree/David Bloomberg.
You're so everywhere.
I
Love
am.
it.
I try it. I try to be. All right, now it's time for predictions.
And
So
I realized, so there's 6 people left. I did
yes,
the math.
yes, yes.
Okay.
The preview showed us that next week Q said he needs a storm, which makes sense because, as we've talked about, he thrives in chaos. Charlie
Mm-hmm.
says he has to vote out Maria. Ben thinks it'll be his favorite blind side of the season. And Maria is lying down crying and saying something died in her today. Now,
Yeah.
if I had to guess, I'd say the Maria thing is an early clip that's a reaction to the response she got from Liz and Venus regarding her pizza reward decision. Which, by the
Hmm.
way, pizza and hot dogs would also make a good reward. F
That's
yeah.
fair.
And they probably still wouldn't take Liz. But
She might be allergic. You don't know.
she can eat meat. She can eat beef.
Could you eat
So
pizza?
gluten-free. She's allergic to wheat, not gluten
But see,
itself,
this
but
is
wheat.
so she couldn't eat pizza.
Yes, she could, because gluten-free, when they say gluten-free, they don't use wheat.
But was the pizza gluten free?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
that
okay.
Jeff even said it was.
Oh, I didn't remember that part. I'm
Yes.
so very sorry. This is why I was checking with you.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the
So
clarification, David. Gosh. Jeez, Jessica. Don't you
how can
listen?
you not listen to Jeff? Come on.
Because I'm too busy tweeting. Unlike
Oh,
you, I
okay.
was tweeting.
Yes, yes. You know what I noticed on the big screen for the first time ever? In
What?
the intro, there's a big wave at the beginning, and it has a 46 superimposed on the face of the wave.
Oh,
I
really?
never noticed that before, and all the times I watched on TV, it took watching it on a giant screen to notice that. And I whispered it to the person next to me, and they said, I didn't notice it either.
That's fascinating. I'll have to pay
So,
attention.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Duly
Anyway,
noted. Okay.
um, anyway, all of what I mentioned seems to be a bunch of dramatic things that don't actually play into the decision, except for what Ben said, because I think he was clearly not talking about Maria, as was implied by the placement of the quote. I think he was talking about Q, because we have found through various ways, mostly interviews and the like, we haven't really seen it, but Q and Ben have not gotten along. Like Ben has been the target of Q.
That
Just,
is fair.
you know,
Yeah, there was some commentary about that
right.
in was it
Yes.
even in Venus was mentioning it too, I feel like?
I
Yeah.
don't remember for sure, but yeah.
But
Um,
yeah.
so I could definitely see Ben saying this would be the, the sweetest blind side or whatever it was. Um, it was supposed to be Q this week. And now it's even more imperative to get him out so Maria's power is reduced. I think they will follow through this time, and we will say goodbye to the Q skirt.
The Q skirt. What a silly idea. Watch him become like a millionaire because of it.
He's already a millionaire.
Okay. Well, a multi-million, I don't know, whatever. He's gonna make more money.
Mm-hmm.
He and Liz can
That's
sell
right.
them together. They can.
I don't
So
see the two of them selling anything together personally, but yeah.
no. Well, I do feel like ugh, this is so troubling. Ben's fine. I think Liz is fine. I worry about Charlie, but he seems to be so liked by so many people that I don't feel like he's
Mm-hmm.
going to have anything to worry about. Kenzie is not necessarily fine, but like and Q is just as we've discussed is
Mm-hmm.
very much chaotic. Oh, goodness. And I feel like Q is going to be that person that there's an interesting thing happening with Q, right? You don't want him to take that third seat,
Mhm.
which I despise that there is a third seat even available. But anyway, so you don't want him to take that third seat. But also, I feel like there's this thing about Q that makes him very scary because we've talked about is he playing the game at a different level that no one has ever played at, and that's why it's working for him. And I don't think that's what he's doing,
I think he's
but
playing the game at a different level. It's just not a
it's not a conscious
level
like
level. It's
yeah, like he didn't decide that like
yeah,
this is
right,
what I'm gonna do. It's like this is
right,
what he's doing, but it's not because
right,
I like when he says I'm a game changer, I don't think this is what he meant when he said
right.
game changer. And so it would be fascinating if that's what it turned into in a final three where he was like, haha, like he
Mhm.
is like I said that David Wright was a Kaiser Sose. Maybe Q really is the Kaiser Sose, where all of a sudden he's gonna be like, guess what, everyone? I knew what I was doing all along.
He may say it, but I think he would be more a Australian Survivor Christie in that situation
Yeah,
than,
yeah. So, oh goodness. Mm, I I don't want to say it's Q. I don't. I don't want to say it's Q. I want to
Well, I'm not
say,
gonna let you say it's anybody but Q.
oh, come on.
No.
Fine. Maria.
Okay.
I'm going to do it. I'm just going
All
to say
right.
Maria. I'm
All
going to go
right.
for it because I want Q to be that kind of Sose. I want to see what happens.
Yeah.
I do. I want to see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Get access to all the special podcasts that are put out just for patrons, plus the Facebook groups and Discord, and of course, early access to things like tickets for live shows. Uh,
Mhm.
you can support shows like ours and everything on the network by becoming a patron at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Also, make sure you're subscribed to all the reality TV RHAP-Ups podcasts by going to robhasawebsite.com/RHAP-Ups feeds and selecting your podcast service of choice. You will get all of the different RHAP-Ups, including the Survivor ones, like us, obviously, the B&B, Survivor International, and also podcasts on a number of other shows and topics, like Big Brother Canada just ended. It literally ended while we were in the theater, I think. I think it was ending at the same time. People were on their phones like, oh my God, I can't believe this just happened. I don't know what happened. I didn't watch it. But but if people here, if they're watching or we're watching it and you want to know what happened, well, all the exit interviews are in the RHAP-Ups feed. So, go there and subscribe.
That's right. And we should thank everyone for all of the content, not only that is created by our HAP-Ups, but all the work that goes into create that content. So Scott St. Pierre and his team do all of the editing, not just for Why Blank
Mhm.
Lost, but for all of the content that you've just heard described by David Bloomberg. So thank you to each and every one of them for the incredible work that you do, putting all of this together, such quick turnarounds and so much content. It's incredible to see how much it's growing and how much bigger it has become.
Mhm.
So thank you, Rob, for doing this for everyone and for creating such an incredible platform.
Yes, and thank you, Jessica, for another great episode. One more thank you to everybody in Chicago and to Rob and Sam for bringing the live show there. I know it was a lot of work. We will see everyone next week here. And of course, you can find me online everywhere before then. Bye,
Yes,
everyone.
thank you, David, and thank you for all the listeners.
All right. Bye.
Bye.